Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Thanks for joining us for the very first ever podcast. Super excited today. We've got DonEl Brown with us today. DonEl's an awesome dude, guidance counselor of 4 years,
Yeah,
high
4 years.
school, and also father, husband, awesome dude, great
Yeah.
friend, loves Jesus, and just excited to introduce him to you today. So, DonEl, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here, especially for the first one, so this is exciting.
You are the first podcast guest,
Yeah,
so one of who knows how many. We'll see.
Hopefully many.
Have you been a podcast guest before?
I have not. I actually have a couple friends who've started some, but they're all back in Philadelphia, so I've not
All right.
been invited to any yet. So
Cool.
fingers crossed for that. After this
Sweet.
can be my start of a long career in podcast guesting.
All right. Hopefully this is your launch.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. Well, Dial just finished his fourth year in guidance counseling. I want to dive into a little bit more about that. But first, tell us a little about your upbringing. You're from PA. What was it like growing up there, family, and stuff like that?
So I am from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Cool.
I grew up in the Northern Liberties part of the city, if anybody knows where that is. I have a pretty small immediate family. It's me, my younger brother, he's about 6 years younger than me, and my mom and dad, but a massive extended family. So we always had aunts, uncles, cousins
Cool.
staying and living with us for part time or another. I was homeschooled up there. My mom cared a lot about making sure I had a faith-based education and one where I could really explore the things that I was interested in. And so that was a unique experience. Well, I guess not truly unique, but like it's a very interesting
different.
experience. Yeah. And so with that, I went to college in Philadelphia, Jackson University, got my master's in Philadelphia at Temple University, and then I had a passion for working with young people. So I knew I wanted to go into counseling of some sort, and school counseling fit that mold.
Cool.
That's what I wanted to do.
So what you said you were homeschooled?
Yeah,
I think I knew that. Up through what age were you homeschooled?
Up through college.
Oh, all the way through until okay.
So
cool.
first grade to 12th grade.
All right. Was that weird, like hanging out with friends that weren't homeschooled, or were everybody cool with it?
Yeah. I think growing up, I really wanted to be. All my friends went to like high school. And I was like, oh, I want to go to high school so bad. But I think what I appreciate now, being older, is the individualized attention that I got, and the ability to work like at my own pace, and kind of the freedom to know that if I was going to get something done, it was going to be on me, and I didn't really have like a teacher to be like, oh, remember you got to do this. It was just like I knew the work that I had to do, and I had to get it done, which actually helped me a ton in college.
Was there any sense of missing out, like even now looking back, like I wish I had the high school experience?
I think it's fun, like getting to see my students and the different activities they get to be involved with in school. Like I think it would have been really fun to like be part of like a team sport or something like that. But I got to do a lot of different activities and a lot of traveling, a lot of things like that in college.
Cool.
So I think it would have been nice to be part of that. But at the same time, I appreciate the skills and lessons that I learned from that.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you went to Drexel
Yes.
first, and how far away is that from home?
So Drexel is in Center City, Philadelphia.
Cool.
I actually stayed home for college just to save money, which was nice because Drexel was expensive, even with scholarships. So that's about 3.5 miles from where I grew up. And so I biked there every day, and then Temple was like 2.5 miles, so I biked there too.
Cool.
So I got to save a lot by staying home with family, and I biked everywhere because when you live in downtown Philadelphia, like most major cities, you don't really need a car unless really want one.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
So at what point are you deciding, hey, I want to go into counseling, or I want to work with youth, or I want to be a high school guide? How long did that formation, or was there something else on the radar?
Yeah, it's funny because it kind of, for my parents, it kind of came out of left field because I'd worked at the Philadelphia Zoo a long time. I really loved environmental science, really loved conservation, really loved just like wildlife sciences. So they were assuming it was going to be like that or veterinary medicine or something like that.
Cool.
Because I actually gotten accepted into a veterinary medicine program that was like a straight through like undergrad to finishing your veterinary medicine degree. But I think what changed was that I saw myself and a lot of my friends like need more support than we were getting in high school, and I was thinking like it would be cool to be somebody for me that I didn't have when I was in high school, or somebody for my friends that my friends didn't have when they were in high school. And just having a lot going on, not knowing what to do with their future, having different things on the horizon, but not knowing which direction to go in.
Right.
Somebody to kind of help them figure that out. And so at Drexel University, they have what's called the co-op program.
Cool.
And what that is so Drexel is a 4-quarter school, so it's all year round. So 6 months of the year you're in school, 6 months of the year you're at a co-op, which is like an internship that can be paid or unpaid.
Cool.
In my program, for my undergrad, it's 5 years because you do 3 co-ops, so that's 18 months of work experience by the time you graduate, which is really cool. My first one was actually an assistant to a school counselor at a high school in Philadelphia.
Nice.
And so after that, I was like, oh yeah, this is the one. This might be what I'm trying to do. So that kind of solidified that desire to be kind of like a resource for young people.
Yeah, awesome. That's super cool. So when you made that decision and you like, did you have a decision made before you went to work at that high school, or was work like that was a maybe, and then you went to work at the high school and it was like, now this is it?
I think what it was like, it was definitely a maybe, like possibly, probably, because at first I had studied psychology and criminal justice in school, and I was like, I think I want to be a therapist, counselor, and I didn't exactly know how that would play out or what direction to really go in that, because it's kind of broad. But then that experience interning at that high school was like, okay, that's for sure.
Cool.
I like that.
All right. So you did how long's the internship?
6 months.
And you're like just sitting next to another guidance counselor the whole time?
Yeah. So I was
picturing your office at Jones High School.
With a second person
fitting in there. So do they have a bigger office?
No, not really. The nice part was, so our college and career suite.
Yeah.
Their office was kind of like that. So like the office space was small, but it was connected to a little side.
Okay.
So like I would either be working in there with her at the time. Her was a sweet little old lady named Miss Parker. But I was either in there with Miss Parker or in the attached side room, either talking to students, helping out with creating flyers, working on programs, stuff like that.
Cool. All right. And during that time, the internship, did you get to do a lot of actual like counseling of students, or was there rules that like, hey, you're just an intern?
Right. Yeah. So there were. As a undergrad intern, there are rules about like you can only have so many types of interactions. They're only allowed to tell you about so many types of things. With students' permission, you're allowed to sit in with the counselor there to watch them and like observe them talk with students. But when it comes to like working with students informally, whether it's trying to figure out what they want to do after high school, them asking me questions about what was the college application process like? What is the college experience like? Which is a big part of what I do as a counselor now. So like I got to do all of those parts of it as well.
So is there any point where there's a kid that's like asking you a question, you have to be like, hold on, let me go get Miss Parker, or you're like, they're asking about the college experience, you're like, I'm in college. Like, I feel like I'm pretty equipped to answer this question.
Yeah. Fortunately, during my time there, I didn't have a ton of students open up about anything super crazy that I had to be like, let's put this on pause, take it to somebody else.
Cool.
So a lot of it really was just about like, what should I do about these classes? How do I get better? How do I talk to my teacher? How do I get prepared for going to college? And a lot of that, I'm like, I just did that like a year and a half ago. So
Cool.
Yeah, so that was a good experience for sure.
So you do the internship, and then you graduate, and then it's time to get a job as a guy. What was the transition? Because you moved to Florida, somewhere in there.
Right.
How did that all happen?
So after undergrad, I went straight into my master's program at Temple. Now during this internship, this is my grad school counseling internship, and this one I kind of have kind of like full privileges as a school counselor. So the school I worked at, also in Philadelphia, that one I was able to do pretty much all the things that the counselor there did.
Cool.
So I still had to shadow some, and I shared the office with her. But I got to lead classroom lessons.
Awesome.
I got to have counseling sessions with students, so that was a really good experience too. Now, after that, I was applying for jobs in Philadelphia, and I'd actually gotten accepted by the district, so I could start applying to schools directly. But I also, came down to Florida because my girlfriend at the time was like, "Oh, we should try moving to Florida." And I was like, "If I can get a job in Florida, I guess we can go to Florida." So I came to Florida, came to an in-person, because things were still in person.
Yes.
Back in 2019. Yeah, I came to an in-person job fair.
Cool.
And so it was districts from all over the state here in Orlando, and I had a bunch of interviews with a bunch of different districts, and it turns out being a male African-American counselor is very rare. So every booth I walked by was like, "Wait, you're a counselor? Come on over.
They're
check
fighting
this
for
out."
you.
Yeah, exactly. Which was a nice experience. It's like, oh, okay, I won't have to struggle to find a job, which is nice.
That's awesome. Was that a concern coming down? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I just didn't know what the market looked like for counselors, how big the demand was, what the need was. So getting down and finding out that like every district wants you for their district is like, oh, nice.
Awesome.
They like me.
That's awesome. And when you did the masters, did you know? Like here in Florida, you need a master's to be a guidance counselor. Is that the case everywhere up there?
Yeah. So I don't know everywhere. I know most places do require it. I know they require it in Pennsylvania and they require it here in Florida as well.
All right. And that was why you went for the master's.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Because by the time, this was when I did that first internship at Drexel at a counseling center. That was after my sophomore year. So I knew by the time I was a graduating senior, I already knew, like, okay, this is what I want to do. I did the research. What do you have to do to get here?
Yep.
Get the master's. So I was like, let me just, rip the Band-Aid, go do it now. Because I know myself. Like, if I had gotten a job and I was able to make good money and, like, be independent and I didn't have to go back to school again, I'd be like, well, I guess I'm done with school.
Going straight through. That master's, was that a year, 2 years?
That was a 2-year program.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you come to the visit to Florida with the, going to the job fair and all that. Was that a visit or had you already moved?
That was a visit. So that was in, I think, April of 2019, and I didn't move down until the end of July.
Yeah.
So I had come down for that specifically. I stayed with a friend of ours, and I came to that job fair. Had a lot of really good interviews, and ended up landing on Lake County initially. So that's where I worked the first 2 years here in Florida.
So you get a job, East Ridge High School?
Yeah,
is that correct?
East Ridge High School.
So DonEl is such an awesome guy. When my wife and I moved, he was always helping us out around the house, building our little crib for our little guy.
Applied mathematics.
Wife saying, "Hey, thanks for building the crib. Actually, I want to paint it, so let's take it apart, and then we'll take it apart. She'll paint it, and then let's put it back together." So DonEl was over all the time. And I just remember, I felt like every week you had a crazy story from East Ridge.
Yes.
And before we get into that, for people that aren't from Florida, that aren't from the area, how do you describe Lake County?
Yeah.
In comparison, like Orlando's a big city. Lake County's, west of that.
Yeah.
But how do you describe Lake County, and then how do you describe East Ridge High School?
Yeah. Okay. So, how would I describe Lake County? I think I would describe Lake County as on the fringe of a big city because, like you said, it's about 15, 20 miles outside of Orlando.
Yeah.
So East Ridge, Lake County itself is pretty rural. Like if you drive up into Lake County, a lot of it you're kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
Like Tavares, Eustis, Mount Dora. It's like, oh, I am out here.
A lot of cows.
Yeah, a lot of
Done that
cows,
drive
a lot
a few
of
times.
woods, a lot of lakes, as given.
Yeah.
And actually a lot of hills, which is a weird change for Florida.
Yeah, it's like one of the few places in Florida with some smells too.
And you see, like, when you're going up there in the morning, there'll be fog because, the fog is settling in all these hills that are around. Like, wow, this is new.
Cool.
So you don't get this in Orlando. But Lake County, it's on the fringe of a big city. A lot of it's the middle of nowhere, it feels like. But East Ridge itself is actually the closest high school to Orlando in Lake County. So it's the first school that is a Lake County school past the Orange County schools.
Got it. Okay.
So you get a lot of mix. Like there are kids that come from west of East Ridge that are from kind of the middle of nowhere, like more country, and then you have kids that are coming from kind of Stillmore City, just outside of the bounds of Orange County.
Yeah. Okay.
So you get it's a unique blend of city meets country.
So, and I've never been there. Well, I've been there for a sporting event like 20 years ago, but I've never been there during a school day. So, you're freshly graduated. You got this new job. You roll into East Ridge High School, and how's that first week? How many students you got? What's it looking like?
Yeah. Okay. So that first week, I think that first couple weeks was such a whirlwind because, like you said, I'm new to Florida, so I literally moved here the day before I started work.
Oh, jeez.
I move into my apartment, and the next day I have to, go into work to get started for the summer planning. So it was just like everything just moved so fast. They had me in as the 10th grade counselor there, and East Ridge is a big school. I mean, not super big by like big city standards, but it had 2,700 kids, so it's a good size. A good size school. And there we had 6 counselors, but one of them was our head counselor, so she had a different set of responsibilities. So between the counselors, each of us had maybe 600 kids on our
a lot of students, and I'm sure that varies widely across the country how many people you have, but I imagine it's hard to counsel 600 people at once.
You end up seeing just like the emergencies. Or like the students who are doing absolutely worst out of all of the kids in the school, and you just hope the rest don't really need you. Unfortunately, you wish you had time for all of them. I mean, even so, the biggest thing, I'm fresh out of grad school, right? So I'm learning about all the best practices and the things that you learn in school about how things are supposed to run. And best practice is one counselor for every 250 students.
You're like, well, I'm almost triple that, so.
So I get here and I'm like, oh, okay. They tell me I'm the 10th grade counselor. All right, how big is a 10th grade class? They're like, 646 kids. I'm like, oh, okay. All right. We're going to do our best.
So I remember I think you shared stories about how you would go into the classroom, which I thought was really cool because 11 plus years teaching for me, I only remember one guidance counselor actually coming into my classroom. So super cool you did that. Did somebody say, hey, this is what we do here, or were you just like, I'm getting in the classroom? And what was that like?
I think it was a little bit of both, because when it came down to it, the team, we talk about different ways to get different curriculum or to get different messages out to students. And they were like, we could either send an email or a leaflet, or we could do a school-wide like assembly and talk to everybody at the same time, or a grade level assembly and talk to everybody at the same time. And one of the ideas was to go into the classroom. And so when they brought that one up, I did like it. So I'm not going to say it was my idea, but I co-signed it.
You could have blocked it.
Exactly. If I fought hard enough. But I think it was really cool to have that example because going into my school, I remember being on the tour with all the rest of the new employees for the year. And they were like, we had walked past the guidance department, our little wing in the school, and they were like, this is guidance. Don't bother them. They're busy all the time. They don't want to see you.
That was their introduction. That's how you're perceived.
And I was like, oh, that's wild. So it was funny because I guess they're just assuming like, oh, these are just new teachers. Like, I'll walk them through.
They didn't know you were.
Okay.
Won't bother them.
Exactly.
Oh,
it was nice to get the opportunity to be more present, one, with the teachers, because I like building relationships with the teachers because it makes my job a lot easier if they feel like I'm somebody approachable. And then it was nice to be in the classroom because now your students know you. And not just like from a grade-wide assembly with them sitting in the auditorium with 600 other kids, but like you and the 30, 35, 38, 40 of them in that classroom.
Nice. So, all right. So you're there. It's about 6-9 months in. And then we leave for spring break and don't come back. And this is your first year as a guidance counselor. So what was that experience like? Going into spring break? Are you in a groove? And then you're like, all right, I'll be out for a week. And then
honestly, yes. It was crazy because I just remember thinking back to early 2020. It's it's so jarring
Yeah.
how different things got so quickly.
Yeah.
Because I think it started out, and I'm thinking this year is going well. Like you said, I'm getting into a groove. I know what I'm doing a little bit more.
Yeah.
My students know me, and they feel comfortable coming to me. My parents are getting to know me. They feel comfortable coming to me. I'm building good relationships with the teachers. Like, things are going well.
Yeah.
And then I just remember being excited for like the end of the year. Like, all right, my first full year is coming. We're coming to the end of my first full year. Like, that's a successful year. I need this break because even the best of schools, you're tired by the time spring break comes, you know? And so I was like, oh, I can't wait for this break. I had a plan to go visit one of my friends in Houston. And so I was like, oh, I can't wait. And so I fly, break starts, I fly out to Houston. The first day I get there, literally that day, everything closed down.
Oof.
Like,
you had just been on a plane.
I had just been on a plane, and I just got there, and they're like, everything shut down. School's closed for the week, and when you come back, and I was like, oh, okay. All the events that we were going to go to downtown in Houston are closed. We were like, oh, so I guess we'll just watch movies or something. I was like, how long could it
But it'll be a couple weeks.
Exactly. A couple weeks, if that. So fortunately, my flight didn't get canceled going back home. I remember that week gave me a false sense of how hard, being by yourself would be. Because I was staying with him and his fiance, and I was like, oh, this is cool. We're playing games, we're watching movies, we're hanging out. And then I fly home, and I live by myself, and so it's just me, like, in my apartment, twiddling my fingers.
Jeez.
And so school calls back. We're getting calls every day, like updates about how things are going. We're going to be closed for 2 weeks. I'm like, okay. 2
Extra
weeks,
week. Cool.
That's nothing.
Yeah.
I don't mind going back in April. That's fine.
Yeah.
We're going to be closed until May. I'm like, that's weird. We're pushing it close. And then they're just like, we're not coming back at all.
Oh, okay.
Oh, all right. And I, just seeing how that changed the perception for students of what school would be like and what was expected of them, it all kind of just crumbled so fast. From the student perspective and their family perspective, I'll never forget. I had a parent. I got a Google Voice number, so the parents didn't have my regular phone number.
They weren't texting you at home. Yeah.
I had a parent call me, and he was like, "Hey, can you make my daughter do her work? I don't want her to feel like I'm pressuring her." So I'm like, your daughter that you live with, that is in the room next to you right now.
I have 680.
Right, exactly. I'm like, hey, I get it. You gotta throw the counseling list. He's like, I understand. It is frustrating, but maybe you should try talking to her.
So I know how hard, from a teacher point of view, when COVID hit, and I was teaching middle school and trying to be in touch with students that you don't even have any idea if they're healthy, if they're safe, if they're connected, if they're any of that.
Right.
But I had, maybe a couple hundred students, and you've got six. So I know what it was like from the teacher side to try and connect with students. But what was it like from guidance? Did it crank up because more people were having emergencies, or it cranked down because people just weren't getting in touch?
It kind of ebbed and flowed.
Yeah.
So in some senses, it did ramp up a lot just because I'm making calls to families trying to make sure everyone's doing okay there. There are students who are struggling with anxiety or depression or suicidal ideation before we went on break that I'm trying to stay in touch with. But the thing is, a lot of times, sometimes those issues are not also tied with instability at home, but a lot of times they are.
Yep.
And so if school was the only time I could really get in touch with you, because I know for the most part you'll be here, once you're home, I either don't have a working number or you're texting or emailing me back sporadically. Yeah. So just trying to chase after those kids when you can't leave your house and you're locked to a computer in your living room it was really difficult. Jeez. And you just spend a lot of time hoping they're okay because there's nothing more you can do. Yeah. You know what I mean?
That's
trying to stay on top of everything, and everyone was like, "Whoa, all right."
Yeah, I remember having students that were just like, my mom has COVID, and so I can't leave the house. I can't even go to the bathroom or whatever it is. I just remember people being stuck in such difficult circumstances. And now, from the backside, we know how long it's going to be. We know but in the moment it was just like there was so.
Who knows? Who
We had,
knows when
like,
this
no
is
clue.
going to end? Who knows how long we're going to be in this?
Yeah.
Like you said, I had kids who they lived with family members, or they had family members live with them who passed away while the school year is going from COVID. Like I had a student whose aunt lived with them and his aunt passed away.
Jeez.
And I'm just like, hey, please make sure you're logging into class.
Yeah.
It just seemed, you know what I mean?
Felt
It
like
felt
not,
ridiculous. Yeah.
So, all right. So on a less cryptic note, going back, this might have been before COVID, but I have a story in mind that I'm thinking of that you shared, and there were so many that I don't know if we're thinking of the same one. But when I say that you had some crazy stories from Eastridge, which one?
I'm thinking of
comes
the
to your
cow.
mind? The cow. Or was it a bull? I thought it was a bull.
Yeah. It was so it was a cow, but it was like it was a longhorn one. So it was a big. So that story was wild, and it's one of those things that me coming from Philadelphia, like even our agricultural science schools, we don't have just like free range bulls and cows running around. So the ag science teacher had ordered this cow. It was like a longhorn cow to come to the school and be delivered. And they didn't coordinate delivery times. And they hadn't really prepared a stable for it yet. So they were just like, drop it off. It'll hang out in the pasture.
This sounds great.
Cool. And it was like, it's going to work fine. The bull gets dropped off overnight. Why? I don't know.
A bull was dropped off at high school in the middle of the night.
Exactly. That makes complete sense. Yes. They were like, drop it in the field, it'll be fine. So the bull's in the field, it's walking around. Of course, he didn't tell anybody at the school that he was doing this. The decision was made a little unilaterally. So now the custodian gets there at 4 or 5:30 in the morning to open everything up. She pulls open the gate, pulls her truck in, is getting out of her truck, looks up, and in her face is looking 1,000-pound bull.
That's awesome. Wish that was on camera.
Yeah, literally. Right, exactly. And so now she's, as you can imagine, freaking out. She tries to jump back in her truck. She, of course, sprains her leg trying to get back into her truck because she's this little old lady. She's maybe 4'10". So she's jumping back into her truck, sprains her ankle trying to get back into the truck, and takes off, not making sure to close the gate behind her again. And so now the cow's like, freedom? And runs off of the school property onto, I think, 27, and causes a 3-car pileup on 27, which then makes a giant pileup for everybody.
In the morning, right before
school. So the cow got there, I think it was sometime around 9 the night before, and by 6 a.m. the cow has now run out onto 27 and got into a car accident. Everybody's late to school. I get there because I come from the other way, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of police. Something must be happening. Something weird must be going on. I find out about the cow, and I'm like, oh no. One of my students was the president of the, what is it, FFA, yeah. She finds out, she drops to her knees and cries right in the hallway because I guess the FFA were excited for the cow that was coming.
Oh, gosh.
And now she finds out it got here last night. Yay. It is now deceased.
Oh, the cow didn't make it.
Yeah, the cow did not make it.
Oh.
Yeah. So apparently cows, especially large ones, are so big and their bones are so hard that when they get broken, you can't really rehabilitate them back. So after it had been hit by the cars, taken out the cars as well, the police came and put the cow down.
So the cow was delivered around 9 p.m. Had about less than 12-hour lifespan at Eastridge High School, and then that was it.
And that was that on the cow.
Wow, that's something you see every day. It's Lake County.
That's Lake County, exactly.
Yeah.
A highway, but also a farm at the local high school. So it was just I never in all I was like, there's no way this was even an option in my head. But now I'm also trying to make sure. For me, the situation is ridiculous. I'm the city kid. Why did you have the cow at the high school in the first place? But I have kids from rural Florida who are looking forward to this all year, and she was not okay.
Oh wow, that's That's something.
Yeah.
So
it is never a dull moment.
yeah, that you had a lot going on that year.
Yeah.
So speaking of the students, what 2,700 students,
Mm-hmm.
you've got over 600 of your own.
Mm-hmm.
What's kind of the demographic of Eastridge High School
Yeah,
as far
I
as race and
think
ethnicity?
demographics wise, I believe it was about 60 or 70% white, 20-25% Hispanic, and then you had 10% black. And then you
Okay.
got your 1.5% of like
Yeah.
Asians, mixed,
Yeah.
other things like that. But generally it's like 60-65% white, 20-25% Hispanic, and then 10% black was left.
From your perspective, how did students get along with each other?
Yeah.
What was kind of the makeup as far as racial, I don't know if tension is the right
Mhm.
word, but like everybody getting along versus everybody separate?
I think it was interesting because for the most part, as a whole, the school got along pretty well. Now there wasn't, from what I'm seeing, walking in the classrooms, walking down the halls, hanging out in the cafeteria during lunch, there's not a ton of like connection between those groups.
Intermingling?
Yeah, exactly. Like, of course, every high school you have some.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say there was none, but
Yeah.
for the most part, the black kids hung out with the other black kids were there. A lot of the Hispanic kids would hang out, and some of them were, newly to the U.S. and they only spoke Spanish, so
Yeah.
they would definitely only hang out with the other Spanish
Yeah.
kids. And then some were, from Florida for generations, and they would mingle a little bit outside of that, but for the
Yeah.
most part, a lot of the Hispanic kids hung out together. And then for the white kids, you had the, groups of white kids, whether or
Yeah.
not they were the dancers and the theater kids, because we had a big dance and theater program, or the music kids, or the athletic kids, or,
The
groups
FFA
kinda,
kids.
or the FFA
Yeah.
kids, exactly. But yeah, I think for the most part, the groups kind of hung to their own.
Was that ever like talked about among staff or faculty or as guidance? Is that something that you're
Yeah.
like, hey, there's something here, or is it kind of people look at it and like, yeah, that's just sort of how it is?
Yeah, unfortunately, it would have been nice to be able to kind of dig more into that. And I think it comes back to like funding and faculty. Like if we had more, then everybody's plates would be less full,
Yeah.
and you can dig into things like making a more cohesive or blended school, environment. But the groups weren't fighting.
Yeah.
They weren't causing troubles for each other or whatever the case may be. There was no, there were no big negatives with everybody hanging to themselves.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, when you're like, I have 600 plus kids, if they're not fighting, then we'll just focus on the major.
Or you mentioned you're kind of just dealing with emergencies. Like when you have that many students, did you feel like you got to do much Like I know a lot of guidance counselors I hear, they say they don't really get to like guide counsel as much as like checking on credits and graduation.
Right. So the nice part that I will say about when I was at Eastridge is that being an undergrad, like an underclassman counselor, I was the 2 years I was there, I was the 10th grade counselor the first year, and then the freshman counselor the second year. Working with the younger students, there was a lot more emphasis on the social emotional well-being and not as much on making sure everybody's on track with credits and all that, because I try to make sure they're on track, but I don't have to be as on track as I would when I became a senior counselor.
Right.
Because it's like, if they don't have everything on track now, they're not graduating.
Yes. Care about your social emotional, but we also need
more
you to
importantly, the school needs these numbers, so I'm gonna need you to come graduate. But I think at my time there, it was nice because I did get to do a lot of counseling, because it was, I don't remember a ton about being 15, but I know there was a lot of emotions involved.
Yes. Lots of process.
And so just having my whole, caseload being 15 and 16-year-olds.
Do you think kids connected with you more because you were young and you were fresh out of college?
I think so.
Cool.
I think so. It was funny a lot. It was always like, how old are you? Because it was like, I was clearly much younger than everybody else in my department. Like the other people in my department either had like grown kids or like kids in high school as well. And I am only 6-7 years older than
Right.
they are, so they definitely were like, oh, I'm going to go talk to Mr. Brown. I even had some kids float over from other people, and I'm like, I'd love to talk more. I really don't have time.
680 of my
Yeah, I got mine. Like, I do care about you. I do.
Yeah,
But.
yeah, I hear you. Okay, so at some point during that time, you're
Yeah.
at Eastridge High School. I'm working at this time at Carver Middle School.
Mm-hmm.
You got the chance to come out and visit. I think it was after school because we ended way later than you.
Yes.
Do you remember much from that visit? I remember you got to come in the afternoon and you got to meet the guidance counselors there, and that was kind of the
I think there were 2 of them there, right?
Yeah, there were 2
I got
female
to
guidance
meet them.
counselors.
They were super nice. I remember walking through the school. It's funny because I had like flashbacks of that high school's layout. Because this past year, so I think they feed into Jones, or at least some of their kids do. So we came there to talk to the 8th graders about coming over. So I was like, oh, I remember these hallways.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, so just hearing about the different ways that Lake County operates compared to Orange County. It's been nice in Orange as far as caseload goes, because my caseload's a lot smaller, which I really appreciate. But yeah, so I do remember a little bit about that. Yeah,
that's a whole other story from a whole other podcast. I could talk about that place. But you're all right. So you do 2 years at Eastridge. Your first year, your first 9 months is what we'd consider normal.
Right.
COVID hits, and then year 2 is kind of this hybrid weird year. What was that like? You're kind of back, but is everybody back? Kids get to choose?
It was very strange. So the way it started out was that kids did get to choose.
Yeah.
So in the beginning of the year, of our 2,700 kids, we had about 500 kids on campus every day.
So like a fifth of what you
exactly
normally had.
So things were really quiet.
Yeah.
Which was kind of
nice.
You're still trying to stay on top of and keep track of the kids who didn't come back.
Yeah.
But it was nice that everything was kind of quiet and calm. But as the months, not even months, because that's too long of a time frame, as the weeks went on, we're getting calls from parents like, they're not working, this isn't working, yada, yada. Yeah, exactly. So I think by the time Christmas break came, we were back up to like 1,800 kids.
Okay.
And by the time the end of the year came, we were like at 24. So.
Yeah. Okay. And how did that affect? I just remember joking in conversations with you about having like a drive-through window at your guidance office.
Yeah.
Kids couldn't come in. What was it like meeting with students during COVID with masks and social distancing and all that?
Yeah, constant masking. Similar to what we had at Jones, we had our like plexiglass in front of like bisecting our desk. You was over there, I was over here. After every kid, you're like wiping down the desk and the chair and everything. Yeah. It felt really a lot more impersonal.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, there were kids who I'd met with all year who I'd see later on, like in passing out their mask, and I didn't know that was.
I remember that. Yeah, that happened to me so many times.
They come across
kids
like
we had a deep conversation.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know who you are.
And I'm like, who? And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, oh, like doing a mental like covering their face. Oh yes, okay, I know these eyes. I got it.
I remember and even the faculty, when I switched schools and I would see a faculty member without their mask on and be like, I'd either be like, think I never saw them before, or take it off and be like, oh, I didn't know that's what you looked like.
Right, exactly. It's funny, I had one kid be like, oh, you have a beard, and I was
no, it's good.
Yeah, I do.
So 2 years at Eastridge,
yeah.
And then you transitioned from Lake County to Orange County, from Eastridge High School to Jones High School.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the transition, and for anybody that's not from Orlando or Central Florida, tell us a little about Jones High School.
Yeah, absolutely. So the transition, it was nice because I wanted to get closer to the city in Orlando, so it was nice to have a job that was closer to the city. And then also, I remember you saying like it was a good school, great things are happening. Like we're doing a lot of work there, but I think it'd be a good environment. And so I made that transfer, had the interview with Kirby being low at the time, and then ended up getting moved over. All of that was still virtual because it was still
Oh wow, I didn't
the
realize.
height of
Okay.
COVID. Yeah, and I got moved over to this school, which I've loved my time at Jones. Like Jones is an awesome place. So a little bit about Jones is that it is HBHS, which is pretty cool, a historically black high school. Which I think was like the only high school that African Americans were allowed to go to when it opened back in the 1890s. So that was really cool to be somewhere with that type of history. And then the neighborhood that it's in is still majority black, and unfortunately it is a pretty high poverty neighborhood. And so with that comes a lot of the hardships that come with extreme poverty, like whether it's housing insecurity, food insecurity, just a lot of different levels of not having stability and security in that neighborhood. And so that does carry over into the way the students live, the way that they interact with school, and a lot of times, unfortunately, the value that they place on academics, when for them it feels more important to have this job and work than to be here and like kind of go through the motions of being at high school. So Jones has a lot of history, a lot of passion. Like most of my students have tons of family members who also graduated from Jones.
Cool.
You get a different kid in there every day, or a parent that's like, I graduated from here, my parent graduated from here, all my siblings graduated from here, my kid needs to finish here too. So
Cool.
Let's make it happen. But definitely like a lot of pride, similar to the kind of pride that you see at like an HBCU or something like that, that kind of family atmosphere, or like this is a tradition that we go here, we graduate from here. Everybody that we know has gone here. You know what I mean? So
that's cool.
Yeah.
So your transition schools, what's your first couple weeks coming in? Because it's not just a move of school, but also districts. Different school district, different school. First couple weeks, is it like everything's different, or you're like, hey, I've got 2 years of guidance counselors, so I'm like 90% got the hang of this?
So I think the big things with schools, and you've been at a couple of different schools, so I know you know, like the specifics of what you do are kind of similar. But just the details around how you do all of it is a little different, and that's between schools, and one school and another school in the same district. So it's even more so like that between 2 different districts, just because it's like, okay, who do I go to in the school if there is a payroll issue? Who do I go to if there's a scheduling thing? Who do I need to let know if I can't make it? Like, how do you put your time in and out? So just all of those little things. Just threw like little wrenches into it, but it didn't take too long to figure that out. And now it's just, okay, what are this school's policies and processes for how do we schedule appointments with kids? How do we meet with kids? How often do we go into classrooms? Do we go into classrooms? Even bigger, what is the support level from administration for counselors on what they do? Because from school to school, some principals are like, we love our counselors, I'm going to support them in any way we need to. And other schools are like, you can get in where you fit in.
You don't, we got time, we got other stuff.
Exactly.
Those are the guidance counselors, we don't bother them.
Exactly. You can get a student when you need to. I've had teachers, I've had administrations not want you as counselors as a whole to pull students out of class. Even if there's an issue or they need to speak with you, you have a scheduled appointment, because they're like, we need to make sure everybody's getting the appropriate class time. Like, that is important, but it's not going to be effective for them if they can't focus because they've got things going on.
And for you to give them the why of, they go back there with a little more motivation on why they're there.
Exactly. So that was a cool, interesting transition coming to Jones, because a lot of things were similar as far as like meeting with students, talking to them, figuring out schedules, and then a lot of things were different as far as the culture of how students interact with guidance, how they know us, how they see us, how visible we are, and then how we interact with administration and teachers and things like that. Because you got to learn like which teachers are cool if you taking them out of their class, and which teachers are going to be mad at you for the rest of the day
or week
if you call again about this student, or which teachers are willing to work with you, which will let you know, hey, I've got a kid who needs something, or you'll have some teachers that are just like, I do not care, just get out of my class.
Take them.
You're right, exactly.
So you said, and we both know that Jones serves students that a lot of them come from enormous challenges, and they come from they have really difficult situations. What are some of the like? Do you have any like great success story? These are things don't get told very often. People talk about the bad or the negative, but like, is there anything awesome that you've seen or that you're extremely encouraged by, or you're like, wow, like we are doing this right?
Yeah. I think one of my biggest things is I had a student who my first year there, he was a junior, and he was way behind on everything.
Yeah.
Like below a 2.0 GPA, so he was looking at not graduating at all. And so at the end of his junior year, we had kind of talked, and he was like, I really do want to graduate. I really do want to finish. And I'm like, all right, then these are the things that I need you to do. These are the things that need to happen, or you will not graduate.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a lot of ways around this. He didn't have the GPA, didn't have the test scores, didn't have the credits. So he needed to get all of these things together. And we kind of talked about that at the end of his junior year. And he was like, no, I really do want to do this. I really want to make this happen. So he came back in the beginning of his senior year and really dove all in. And so he met with me pretty often just to make sure everything was on track, just to make sure he's doing everything he needs to. And he kind of was just going and going and going. And then he got into some trouble of vaping in school.
Yeah. Can't do that for the record.
Exactly. You cannot vape in school. The fire alarm went off, so this made it an even bigger thing because now the city's got to come out and turn it off. And I hear that's like a $500 ticket or something. They got to come and turn off false alarm. So they were ready to expel him, which means he would have had to go to some alternative school. He couldn't have graduated from Orange County. And so I spoke to the principal. I spoke to people at the district. I sent in a letter, a reference just about his character, about how hard he's worked, because this happened, I think, in March, April.
Oh, right at the end.
Yeah. How hard he's worked, how far he's come. And so they ended up keeping him finally, eventually.
Yep.
And he ended up right at the last minute, I think, in May, getting the last test score that he needed. So he pulled through, he graduated, and that was just really exciting to see all of this work, all of this pressing that the two of us did together throughout the school year actually culminating in him finishing.
That's awesome.
And so that was just this is all I needed. Every time things get hard, every time things get difficult, every time it's frustrating, when you have a kid that defies the odds and does get that diploma and has a plan, because it wasn't just high school.
Yeah.
Because that's, it's important.
Right.
But that's kind of of my opinion, that's the least important of the things I want you to get before you leave here.
Right.
I need you to graduate, but that should be a given. We need to have a plan for after graduation.
Yeah.
So we had formulated a plan, had something that he's working towards, and something that he's excited about. And so having him build that, be excited for it, and then be able to move towards it was really exciting.
Yeah, you got to be a huge advocate for him.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's
cool.
And it's funny because I had some people at the school be like, don't really get involved. You don't want your name tied to if things go bad, whatever the case might be. And I was like, I don't know anything about that. I'm gonna write this letter. I'm gonna send it out. So
that's awesome. I've struggled with that before too, where people, you don't what if he messes up, and then just take the chance. You took the chance and it paid off, and that's even if it doesn't. You got to be the person.
I don't get to say well, maybe if I had it tried.
Yeah, that's huge. Do you feel like you get to make a bigger difference? I know your student load is smaller at Jones. Do you feel like you get to be an advocate for a lot of students all the time?
I do, and I think that's because the difference here is that there's a lot of students who maybe don't have, in Claremont, it's up and coming. There's a lot of new builds. There's a lot of new families there. The houses that they're building there are expensive. So a lot of the families that come do have college educations that are more white collar, career oriented. So a lot of those students kind of see the blueprint, and a lot of the help they need is real, and it is, but it is more social emotional, as opposed to if I don't have somebody advocating for me or helping me with this, I will not graduate and
Yeah.
I do not know how to apply to college. Versus at Jones, there are a lot of students whose families haven't done all of those like college acceptance and going through that process or applications. We have a lot of families whose parents haven't even graduated high school themselves. So it's like you get to work with them through these big things that will change the trajectory of their whole life.
Yeah.
And I think was a really exciting part about being a Jones. So even with the smaller caseload, I feel like I got to make a bigger impact in my time here, and an impact that kind of, in a way, matters more.
That's awesome. That's cool. And so you said HBHS, Historically Black High School.
Yeah.
Super cool environment. So what would you say the demographics are of Jones? Because you went from Eastridge, which is a majority white school, to Jones. What would you say the demographic breakdown roughly is?
If I had to give a rough one, it'd be like 92% or even 95% black, maybe 4 or 5% Hispanic, and then 1% other. I think in this graduating class, I think we had 2 white kids.
Yeah, I was there. I think that sounds about right. 1 or 2. So, what is the conversation around race at school when it comes to faculty, and then what is it when it comes to students? Because I imagine it's an extremely different conversation when the demographics are completely different.
Yeah, it's funny because like I had you and a number of other teachers at the school who I know, who I'm friends with, who are white, and it's funny because it's like y'all are some of the only white people I know. Like, at all. So I think for the students, it's interesting to see because it's not something that you see often in academia in America. Like whether it was for me when I was in university or working at other high schools and stuff like that, for kids to be in a setting and kind of live in a context where they don't really know any white people that are not on like TV or like the police that are in the area. You know what I mean? Like the teachers are the only ones. Like I have a number of kids. Like Miss So and So is the only white lady I know personally. I think for the teachers, from what I've heard, for me, like being African American myself, I'm kind of like, I'm black. Kids are black. Like that's I know the neighborhood. That's how it is. But I recognize that can be a unique experience for a teacher coming in if they didn't know the demographic of the neighborhood of the school, or if they've never been in a setting where this maybe white teacher is now the minority in this setting for the first time in their life. Because it's like if you grew up in a high school in a neighborhood where it was mostly white, and you went to college and most colleges are mostly white, and now you're like dropped in this environment, and it's like, oh, I'm like the only woman.
That was the experience for me, and it was this beautiful experience. Like I think for a lot of black people, you get accustomed to being in a situation where you're the minority. And I think a lot of white people don't get into a place where that's the situation for them, and I think it's a beautiful and necessary experience for people to be
I think that
part
empathy, like you kind of get an understanding of like that. How sometimes I, as a black person, if I'm in a setting that is mostly white, it's like there are things that I'm like, how do I operate best in this setting? How do I make sure I'm comfortable? How do I make sure everybody else is comfortable? Like, there are uncomfortabilities that you feel. And I think if you've never been in a setting where you are the minority, then it's hard to have empathy for that. But once you're in that setting, you can say, oh, okay, like, there are times where I feel uncomfortable, where I'm not sure how to navigate this situation because I'm not in company of my general peers anymore. And so once you've experienced that, it's easier to empathize and connect with somebody else who experiences that.
And that's not to say that it's the same, but it's a great experience. And one thing I noticed about Jones is really beautiful is the way the community has come around. I feel like there are a lot of organizations in the community that said, we are going to invest in Jones, we're going to mentor students at Jones, we are going to provide the best of what we got. And I saw a lot of organizations come in and say, we are going to make a difference here.
And I think that was really cool too. And that was a big difference from, coming from East Ridge to coming to Jones, which is, I think, an official community partnership school where, you do have so many people in the community. Like the community itself, the neighborhood itself, so many people went there. And then, like, the city of Orlando, especially in that area, like, so many of the businesses are like, Jones is important. It's kind of like a pillar in the community. Like, we want to be supportive here. We want to invest here. We want to see these students do well.
That's awesome. So, you were at graduation. Both years. I've been a few graduations, a lot of graduations as a teacher, but what's graduation like as a guidance counselor? And you got to read the names, which is super cool.
Yeah, that was awesome. I think graduation as a counselor, so I know some of the teachers help us out with it. Not all the teachers, especially not when it's during the school day like it was this year.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but it is, so we have the students show up and you're in the hallway with them trying to make sure they're all lined up appropriately, trying to make sure they have their lanyards and their stoles and everything is looking right, making sure they have their cards so they can hand to whoever's reading the name so they can say their name right. It's kind of like trying to herd cats. They're all like in the hallways with their friends, they're trying to talk, they're trying to hang out. I'm like, guys, I need you all to stand along the wall in alphabetical order. I'm like walking down, and this kid's up here, and his last name starts with T, and I'm like, why are you up here when you need to be back here with the T's? I've got a W up hanging out with his friend in R's, and I'm like, guys, we are walking in 5 minutes.
You need to be in the right spot.
But so this year was nice. Like it was dope getting to read the names off. And getting to stand there right before the stairs to see like every one of your kids come through, because we got to read the names for our own alpha.
Cool.
So it's like I know all of these kids. It also helped because I've been saying their names all year, so I know how to say everybody's name in my alpha. So somebody new didn't have to like, I don't know.
You don't want to mess it up at graduation.
Exactly. Everybody wants their name said right at graduation. So.
You get some hate mail after that.
Right. It was cool being able to do that. I did like last year, the previous year, because we did get to stand on stage and like shake hands and hug like as they walked across. So that was really nice, especially like for your alpha and your kids that you really poured a lot into. But you still get to have some time for that when you're saying the names too. So.
That's cool.
As long as you get to see them all, because afterwards it's almost impossible sometimes to find everybody because they kind of come out and just like scatter.
And families and everybody. Yeah,
exactly.
So, all right, well that's huge. And so you did 2 years at East Ridge, 2 years at Jones, and now you're a father. How has that played into all this, man? That's living the dad life, man.
It's tiring.
Less sleep, more sleep deprived.
Yeah, a little bit more sleep deprived. I like sleep so much, like to the point where some days I wake up and I'm like, oh man, I can't wait till bedtime tonight. So like having a child, so Nova, she's 6 months old now. And she just is very specific about how she likes to get put to bed. And so we're now at the point where she does sleep through the night once she is asleep.
Awesome. That's a great milestone.
On once she is asleep.
So,
a couple nights it took us literally 2 hours. Like we try to put her down at 8 o'clock. She'll sleep from 8 to 7:38. And it was like as soon as you rock her, she'll go to sleep. You put her down. Crying. You pick her up, you rock her, you go to sleep, put her down, and we had a couple nights of just 2 hours of that. So it was 10:30, 11 o'clock by the time we were going to sleep from 8 o'clock putting her down. Fortunately, the one night this week, we did let her cry for a little bit. She cried for 6-7 minutes and then went to sleep. And we were like, did we do it?
Victory.
I think we did it. And then another night she cried for 10 minutes and went to sleep for the whole night. And now she's fingers crossed, she's good now.
That's awesome.
So we lay her down, she'll cry for a minute or two, and then she goes to sleep. And I'm like, thank God. So that was rough because it was right in the middle of winter break. We go home for winter break. New Year's Eve, we're out with our friends. We go to bed late New Year's Eve, like you do. And then we wake up New Year's Day. My wife was like, I got a headache. And so I'm like, oh, it's just a headache. She gets headaches all the time. She's like, nah, it feels different. I'm like, okay, we'll head to the hospital. So we head to the hospital New Year's Day. And then we get there. And I feel like when you go into the emergency room, they're always just like, oh, you're actually fine. Have this aspirin, a $500 bill, and then we'll see you in a couple of weeks. And we get there, and they do the triage, and they're like, oh, no, you guys are not leaving until you have a baby. And so I'm like,
we didn't bring our bag.
Oh, it's time. No, literally, we didn't. I had to run home, grab the bag, and come back. But yeah, so she went to the hospital on the first. They were like, yeah, based on dilation and all that, you'll probably be here like another 4 or 5 days before the baby comes. And we're like, oh, we just gotta stay till then. So we're like gearing up for camping in the little room,
Man.
and she literally comes at 2:30 in the afternoon on the 2nd of January.
Wow.
So everything moved really fast.
They're like, take your time, just relax.
Right, exactly. They're like, you'll be in antepartum for 2-3 days, and you'll probably be in, pre-labor for 2 or 3 days, and then everything will be done. And it was like, boom, boom, and baby's here.
Man.
And so I was out for 2.5, I think, weeks.
Yeah.
Before I came back, and it's funny because I came back and I had people like, I emailed you and you didn't answer, and I was looking for you, and I'm like, I had a baby.
My
like,
caseload
I'm
is
so
now
sorry.
one,
Yeah,
two,
exactly,
wife
exactly.
and little one.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Congratulations.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so
man.
coming back those early mornings coming back initially were rough because it was like she was trying to be, she's a 1.5, 2-month-old. She's waking up every 2-3 hours because she's hungry or something.
I felt like I was a morning person until having a baby, and then it's like you're.
No, I'm not. I just want to sleep, please.
Well,
But yeah, that was quite the transition going from like being just a husband, which is compared to having a child, super low maintenance, to being a dad, and then still trying to have all the energy to give everything that you can when you're at work every day.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, man. That transition to dad life. That's the best one, man. That's awesome. So, all right. So, you finished at Jones High School. Tell us what's next.
Yeah. So, we're moving back to Philadelphia.
Come on.
That's where our family's from. My family's all there. Her family's all right around there. So it'll be nice to be back close to the family, have some more help. And I will be moving to Lower Merion School District right outside of Philadelphia.
All right.
Yeah.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
man.
Thank you. I appreciate that because that was a process.
I imagine it's a lot harder to get a job as a guidance counselor there than here, although you got experience.
Yeah. So even with the experience, I was applying to a bunch of different jobs because in my head I was like, that one's kind of a long shot, so I'm gonna still apply. So with Philadelphia School District, you apply to the district. You have that initial interview is about 45 minutes, and then they flag you as like approved by the district, and then you can apply with schools.
Cool.
And so I applied for like 3 or 4, I had interviews with 3 or 4 different schools, and they're all like, oh, we love you, come here directly. Because most larger districts like Orange County have shortages, so they're trying to if you're good, then
you got experience.
Exactly, come on by. Especially like I said, with being an African American male and a counselor, is not common.
Right.
And so a lot of schools in Philadelphia do have, as you can imagine, black students. And a lot of black males, they just don't see that representation in the schools. And so I've got schools hitting me back like, oh yeah, definitely come here. I'm like, oh no. But the process for Lower Merion is extensive.
Okay.
So I know we were talking about interviews earlier. Theirs was a 4-interview process.
Wow, that's a lot of interviews.
So you have the one on we had one virtually, and they were like, all right, we'll let you know about the second one if you make it to that, that level. Make it to the second one, that's another virtual one. They're like, okay, the third one has to be in person. So I'm like,
now you got to invest in flying there for not a guarantee.
Exactly. And so I'm like, okay, I got called to the 3rd interview. Hopefully this goes well. So I come up and they're preparing. You got to prepare for a writing sample. You got to write a letter of recommendation under a time limit. You got to do a care plan for a student, a mock care plan. So there's performance aspect and then the interview as well. And that's the 3rd interview. And then if that one goes well, then you have the 4th one. Because I was coming from out of state, they were like, we'll schedule them back to back just in case. And so I was like,
it's intense though.
Thank you. Yeah. But like you said, it's a gauntlet now. So I'm there the one day for the one interview, and then the next day for the next interview. And then after I fly back home, because literally the second interview is the day I fly back to Orlando because I still have work here.
Yes. Goodness.
They let me know that I did get the job there. So that was just really exciting. But it was just like, whoa.
Was it a panel? Was it?
Yeah. All of them were panels. So.
Wow! Congratulations, man. It's nice to go up there knowing you got it.
Yes.
Well deserved.
Yes, it was definitely really exciting. And it's nice because they like the compensation at the district's a lot better than Orange County, a lot better than Lake County, even a lot better than Philadelphia School District, even though it's right next to each other.
Awesome.
So it'll be nice to have a little bit more to start building those next life steps. Because we're moving back, so now it's like, right, buying a house, like preparing for all these things. We have a daughter now, saving up for college for her, saving up for retirement. Yeah, all those adulting things. I was in my early 20s. I was like, yeah, whatever.
Man, that's exciting. So, last question, I almost forgot, this is huge. You're from Philadelphia, you're working in Philadelphia schools. Have you watched Abbott Elementary?
Oh, yes.
One of my favorite shows.
Yeah, I have. I've watched, so I've like halfway through the first season of Abbott Elementary. I love that show a lot. It is very funny. It's very feel good. Like, I feel like I like action, adventure, like horror. So a lot of like my entertainment is like dark and scary. So it's nice to have like Abbott Elementary, which is like lighthearted fun, and also like taps into some of the real stuff you see when you work, you know, in schools in the city.
My wife and I love it, and one of the things we love about it is it's funny because you look at how like under-resourced and all, but you're like, it's funny because it's true.
Right,
it's funny, but it's true. And
like every episode, like me and my wife, like she loves it, but she doesn't work in schools, and I'm like, that's hilarious because that's actually
they're not exaggerating. That's real.
I'm like, that's ridiculous. That happened like yesterday.
This is documentary.
Yeah. Seriously.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah,
well,
it makes me even more scared about the prospect of ever working in an elementary, though. I'm just like, I think I'll stay with my kind of adult.
Yes, that's a little bit more, man. Well, DonEl, thanks so much for the time today, man. We really appreciate it. Hopefully, people have enjoyed, and best wishes on the journey.
Thank you so much.
Let's go get lunch, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.